Good evening. You're watching Straight Talk with Eugene Chan. And our guest this evening is Mr. Jochen Biedermann. Mr. Biedermann is the Managing Director of the World Alliance of International Financial Centers and Managing Partner of FinTech Consult. He also founded and is the CEO of Blockchain Asia in Hong Kong. He is an international expert in FinTech and blockchain industries. Welcome, Jochen.
Welcome, Eugene.
Jochen, I know you're based in Germany, but you do come to this region, Hong Kong and China and rest of Asia for your businesses. But I now suppose this is your first time back to Hong Kong after the epidemic, right?
This is true. My last trip was January 2020, more than 2.5 years ago.
Exactly before the epidemic broke out. So how do you find our new quarantine measure, so-called a 0+3 experience?
Quite convenient. First of all, the arrival at the airport. This is very well organized, so you don't have to go to the quarantine hotels anymore. Everything works smoothly. Of course, it includes daily testing and PCR tests and so on. And for the first 3 days, you're supposed to eat in the hotel, which is not a big issue, right?
Did that bother you? Because Hong Kong is a great place for different cuisines.
Yeah, of course, you want to have a nice Cantonese dinner or enjoy some Shanghai food in the evening. But come on, 3 days, we can survive, right?
Yeah, thank you for your understanding. It's something that we would like to be more hospitable to our guests, but at this moment we want to maintain our low level infections. So have you found Hong Kong any different prior to the epidemic, like when you were here in year 2020? And much difference you see in Hong Kong?
Of course, it's less crowded, right? So many visitors, tourists, international tourists, but of course also from the mainland. You know, you're missing them. You know, before I used to walk in TST, and then it's difficult. You always have to go zigzag. Now you can even go straight for 20 meters, right? This is a difference. But of course, they will come back.
Right. I know you represented the World Alliance of International Financial Centers, which is a non-profit organization based in Belgium. So very briefly, what is this World Alliance and why is it needed?
We organize a collaboration between the leading financial centers. So we are a membership organization, and our members are that government entities or government bodies or councils, you know, developing and promoting their national financial centers, like the Financial Service Development Council here in Hong Kong. And yeah, we bring them together, we organize a collaboration, while there's also competition, of course.
Right. How are all the financial centers doing post-COVID? I mean, for most countries, they're basically they're treating that is over. But in Hong Kong and China, we still want to fight it, making sure ensure the health of our people. Can you give us a bird's-eye view of how all the financial centers are doing post-COVID?
Of course, it differs a lot. In Europe, they're doing pretty well. Of course, there are geopolitical tensions we are all aware of, but the financial centers are doing well. In Asia as well. You know, anyway, this is a decade of the Asian financial centers with a lot of growth. And yeah, surprisingly, we see more and more aspiring financial centers in Africa. And this is my bet for the next decade. We'll see a lot of growth there. Right.
Do you see any financial centers that are doing better than the pre-pandemic times?
Not really. I think it's on the same level, because the ones who showed extraordinary growth and development before the pandemic, look at the mainland financial centers. Of course, they suffer a little bit from the less convenient access. Let me put it that way.
Right, Jochen. I mean, let's come back to Hong Kong, where this is where we are based. In the latest Global Financial Center Index, Hong Kong has dropped a notch to rank number 4. What is your assessment of Hong Kong's competitiveness now and in the future? And have our strength enable us to maintain have a competitive edge amongst other countries?
Definitely. I think if you look at that Global Financial Center Index, you know, the results are very, very tight. And there's competition in Asia. You know, there's Singapore, there's Tokyo, there's a mainland like Shanghai. But of course, Hong Kong benefits a lot from a strong capital market, in particular the IPO business. It's the venue for in particular, mainland IPOs. And it also benefits from a well-educated people, in particular in the financial industry. And then it also benefits from early decisions by the Hong Kong government, fostering innovation, look at Cyberport, Science Park, and so on.
Right. There's also been a perception that Hong Kong, one of our strengths is our rule of law, and there has been a perception by some media that there has been a decline in the rule of law in Hong Kong. And what is your take on that?
No, I don't think so. The law is the same, and also what I hear, the rulings are the same. And I think this is a strength, together with that combination of Hong Kong, local, mainland, and international talent here in Hong Kong. And besides the rule of law, very important is also business ethics. And people expect here in Hong Kong, they're not cheated, they're treated well, everything is in order. So this makes Hong Kong strong also as a financial center.
Yeah, but I'm sure all things have two sides to a coin. I mean, thank you for bringing out our strengths, but we must have our weaknesses. What are our weaknesses?
First and foremost, but I cannot say this is a weakness, but this is a very competitive area. While the borders are closed, you have Shenzhen in front of your door, which is a very strong tech hub, right? And nowadays finance is not only finance, but it's also tech, it's combined. You see it every day, right? And Hong Kong is excellent in tech, but Shenzhen maybe even a little bit better, right? So, and Hong Kong need to maintain that speed. For the moment, it's not so important, but as soon as Shenzhen port opens up again, you will face that competition, which is, of course, also an opportunity in the Greater Bay Area later.
Yes. Let me go back to your specialty, the Global Financial Center, which we have an index that Singapore went from 6th place 6 months ago to number 3 now, which is one point over Hong Kong. And there's always a constant comparison between Hong Kong and Singapore. And you know that our chief executive had a policy address recently, and we had some new initiatives. Hope you're aware of them. And do you think that makes Hong Kong a better place as an international financial center?
If you look at the Hong Kong Financial Center, there are different elements, right? So the one element is the access to the mainland. Hong Kong's role as a portal, as a springboard to the mainland. And there, there are the various connect schemes, which even Xi Jinping said, this is important, and this definitely will be strengthened. More and more securities will be eligible for those schemes. This is very helpful. The other thing in Hong Kong is attracting international business, international treasury of large corporates, and so on. And of course, there's competition with other places in Asia, including Singapore. So there you need to be the most attractive place. It's also about nice living, facilities, and so on and so forth, schools, international schools. Hong Kong is doing very well. But of course, Singapore keeps the competition up, which is also good for Hong Kong. So I think both places competing with each other make also themselves stronger.
Right, Jochen, actually, I just come back from Singapore, and I do a site visit there and talk to the people there, and they said to me there, they have a free trade agreement with 5 countries, including the US and Switzerland. What they do is they exempt a group of citizens from the additional stamp duty that other citizens would have to pay if they're going to buy a property. Hong Kong, Mr. John Lee also has that, but it will be sort of a delayed payback in 6-7 years afterwards. So we are getting closer, but do you still think Singapore is doing so-called very competitive against Hong Kong? I mean, what are your suggestions that you would suggest to make Hong Kong going back to number 3 place or even number 2?
As I said, they're competing in different areas. Singapore cannot compete with access to the mainland. This is unique for Hong Kong. And of course, this will be even becoming more important. We'll see the digital yuan. Hong Kong is already a very strong offshore renminbi hub. And the next thing is also to have the digital currencies, the central bank digital currencies. And the Hong Kong government is doing a lot. On the other hand, Hong Kong has by that also access to the industrial base of China, which Singapore doesn't have, that hinterland. So from that point of view, of course, as I said, it's a competition. Some assets will be moved back and forth. Some headquarters might be moved back and forth. But of course, it's very important to maintain a positive trend, because in particular, the international headquarters, they are sticky. They don't go away very easily. If a location has been selected, they tend to stay there. So it's about fighting about each company who sets up a new headquarters in Asia, get it to Hong Kong. But as I said, competition makes both sides stronger.
Right, Jochen, we have talked about what the government can do. But how about private institutions and even the private sector, all the financial institutions? What can we do to make Hong Kong even a more competitive place?
Currently, there are two trends which play a very important role in financial centers. One is tech, and the other one is sustainable finance, right? So financing the fight against climate change, helping the companies to change their production models, but also financing green companies and the transition itself. And this is something which is in the policy address, which is very important, and Hong Kong should excel in this and becoming the hub for carbon financing. And this requires a private sector. Of course, there can be a co-financing by the government, but this requires a private sector to change the business models and provide the capital for those companies who wants to change.
Yeah, Jochen, we have to take a break now, but viewers, please stay with us. We will be right back. Thank you for staying with us. Mr. Jochen Biedermann from the World Alliance of International Financial Centers is on our show this evening, and we have been talking about if Hong Kong is still attractive as a financial center. So, Jochen, in the first part, your message is quite clear that you felt Hong Kong has a lot of niche in maintaining to be a world-class financial center. And one area that Hong Kong has been talking about a lot recently is about talents. Do you think Hong Kong has all the financial talents that we need to continue moving?
In the moment, yes. But of course, Hong Kong need to stay agile. Hong Kong has very strong, excellent universities. But now a new breed of talent is needed. It's again in tech, but it's also in sustainable finance. Now everyone talks about ESG, which is environment, social and corporate governance. So this is a new scoring for companies, how they perform in terms of sustainable finance. And this is a need everywhere. And all over the world, this talent is missing. So this is something the Hong Kong universities have to focus on, and they do already.
Right, I mean, since you mentioned ESG, this is another topic in the financial industry that's very hot at the moment. And what are the two most important topics that are always talked about amongst financiers in Europe within the very broad ESG arena?
First of all, the European Union was the first one coming up with a broad taxonomy on that topic. The EU taxonomy, which basically stipulates what is green and what is not. So what kind of business practice production is green or not. So, and by defining so, then you can start rating companies to what extent they fulfill that criteria, and then have a score, let's say from 0 to 100, how sustainable a certain business is. And now in the European Union, it's not only required for the large companies to report that score and report what they're doing, but also for asset managers, institutional investors, to check the risk in their portfolios, basically check the scoring and see how they're doing. And then investors have demands on this.
Right. Thank you for your take on the ESG. And let's go back to the term you have just also mentioned, geopolitical influences. Yes. This is an area that we've been sort of looking at in Straight Talk. I mean, we want to ask, how is it affecting us? So as a financier and all your friends in the financial world, do you have problem getting access to major markets like US and China?
No, I think this is doing fine. I see other issues. One issue is we had a strong uptake in financing against climate change, for instance, by issuing green bonds. And we saw in the last quarters a little bit of a dip, in particular in Europe. It's now recovering, but of course, if you have other major issues, then maybe climate change, which is very much in the focus, moves a little bit out of the focus. So it's important for Europe, but also in other parts of the world to focus on climate change again, because it's not waiting. The other issue is, and this is more long-term trend, the supply chains changing. Geopolitical tensions makes the companies to rethink their suppliers, whether everything is safe, whether there might be sanctions and so on. And you cannot be just depend on one supplier anymore. So the large corporates, they rethink their supply chains, and also financing goes into this. So this is, of course, will have a long-term effect also on financial centers.
Right, but for Hong Kong, I mean, we used to be a gateway to the mainland. Do you think Hong Kong's position right now still gives us the advantage of being the access to the mainland market?
Definitely. I think this will not go away. Then in a Greater Bay Area, you can, as I said, complement your capabilities of Shenzhen, of the whole Guangdong region, which is very strong in logistics. You know, let's not forget, you have some of the largest harbors here in this area. Logistics play a very important role, and this is then where, you know, finance and logistics interlinks, supply chain. If you have those changes, need to be financed and at the same time become more digital.
Yeah, as you know, that with the mainland restrictions on COVID quarantine, I mean, it's making Hong Kong sort of being the place to go for the time being. Do you think that Hong Kong's role will be kind of diminished or reduced when all the restrictions are relaxed in the mainland?
Definitely not so fast. But of course, there will be competition coming up from the mainland, in particular Shanghai, but to a lesser extent also Beijing. As financial centers, they are not that international yet. But I can tell you, in Frankfurt, in Germany, where I live, there are also representatives from Shanghai, and then also very, very active and promoting Shanghai as a financial center. So there's competition coming up. Of course, the lockdowns has not helped Shanghai, to be fair. But if you're talking long term, Hong Kong needs to be agile because the mainland financial centers will catch up.
Right. Jochen, you know, by and large, in the financial services industry, as I understand, it's about matching opportunities to investors and financial resources with the geopolitical tension they mentioned, and of course, a lot of lingering uncertainty with the war between Ukraine and Russia. How are all the different financial centers around the world carrying out the functions?
They're doing very well. Also during the pandemic, you know, usually governments want to help their citizens, want to help the corporates, and the financial centers, they were in between and helping in the transmission of that funds going to the people and to the corporates in need. This worked everywhere very well, and also there were a lot of short-term measures to help, you know, those people and corporates who suffer. So I think it's doing well, and the geopolitical tensions don't have an immediate impact, with some notable exception, of course. For instance, Moscow was a member of our association. They have voluntarily suspended their membership in March, which was a right move to do, because, of course, if you have sanctions in place, then it's very difficult to continue doing business and staying in contact.
Right. Jochen, you know, earlier on we see that the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz visited the presidency in Beijing, and he being the first leader of the G7 country visiting China since the pandemic. Also, we saw President Biden and President Xi met up as well. Do you think this is a sign of goodwill? Because for financial investors, the perception of the outlook is very important. Do you think there are things or better things to come?
I think the minimum we can expect from our leaders that they talk with each other, right? So if you don't talk with each other, how can you solve any problems? Of course, there are always smaller and bigger problems to discuss. You know, this is what we're also doing in our association. The leaders of the financial centers also should talk with each other, should coordinate their action as much as possible for the benefit of everyone. So I'm personally very positive that this dialogue continues, and Germany and China, you know, they have a regular government consultation. I think there's a very strong dialogue because both are very strong trading partners. Right. And some of this goes via Hong Kong, which also benefits Hong Kong. So from that point of view, I'm positive. But of course, there are always some minor issues to be discussed.
Okay, let's move on to the area that in your specialty about the major trends in financial sector. You have talked about green finance, climate change and all that. And I understand you also put out a white paper on the future of financial centers, in that you said that fintech and innovation in the financial industry are of the utmost importance. So how's Hong Kong doing in these areas?
very well from my point of view. You have a notable number of fintech companies. It's always a little bit difficult to count, but I think around 600 was the latest number I heard. I also privately maintain a list of the fintech companies which are of interest for me in Hong Kong. There are 350 on my private list. What worked very well here, very, very early, must be roughly 30 years ago, there were already the hubs created with Cyberport, Science Park, and so on, where not only fintech founders but also startups can meet, have offices, and get the necessary support. So from that point of view, this works very well. And also the regulatory authorities, the monetary authority, but also SFC, they accommodate the fintechs and help them. On the other hand, what is a little bit difficult for the fintechs in Hong Kong is the overall market in Hong Kong is pretty small, right? 8 million people, for, let's say, a B2C fintech, which needs to have clients, look at the virtual banks, this is pretty small, so they have to expand beyond the borders of Hong Kong. Mm-hmm. And there are two directions, either the mainland or international countries like ASEAN and so on.
Yes. Yeah, Jochen, I mean, since you mentioned the fintech, the virtual banks, to me, fintechs are usually disruptions to existing businesses, just like the virtual banks, mm-hmm. to the banking industry. So if this is correct, does it mean that there will be losers in the rise of the fintechs, and who would they be, and how can they minimize the risk, especially for Hong Kong?
Let me take a little bit the experience from Europe, if you don't mind, which started slightly earlier, open up banking. Now the banks in Europe, by law, there's a regulation in Europe requires them to open up the account data. If you have a bank account, this bank cannot unreasonably withhold the access, with your consent, to your bank account by a third-party provider, right? So maybe wants to give you a loan and wants to see how much money is coming in and out, and if you give permission, then this access is possible. So in Europe, you see a lot of cooperation between banks and fintechs, not so much competition.
In the last 30 seconds of the show, I'd like to ask you, central bank digital currency is another huge topic in the financial world, and you know digital renminbi very well. And what is its importance, especially to Hong Kong?
Hong Kong, as I said, as a strong offshore renminbi hub, could take the role of exchanging that currency. Because if you look at the different countries, there are also European Central Bank is working on a central bank digital currency, as I call it. People's Bank of China, here the monetary authority, Singapore, the MAS, and many more. Mm-hmm. They all have their plans, and some are even well advanced, like the PBOC. But they all bank on different technology solutions. So we know already, from the coins and bills, there need to be someone to exchange them, right? And Hong Kong could be the place where you exchange the international central bank digital currencies against the digital yuan.
All right. We have to leave it here. And Jochen, thank you for sharing with us your perspective on the various international financial centers and how Hong Kong can continue to be successful. As before, Hong Kong people will not be complacent and rise to the challenges ahead. Have a pleasant evening and good night.